All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Eddie, I think this is gonna require your vice chairman's signature. I wasn't there for those, and I'll do the others.
And we'll get Mr. Watkins to sign the joint public.
Oh,
hearing, 'cause
okay.
He spoke on behalf of the planning commission for that.
Oh, okay, so that's the one you have up below that one, Eddie.
All right.
On the back there. Okay, housekeeping is done.
Thank you so much. All right.
All right, now let's move on to the next item is the public hearing to consider a text amendment to the Blackstone zoning ordinance that would permit boarding houses in the R1 residential district as a conditional use. All right,
We have the applicants, Megan Little is the actual owner of the property. It's the old Bagley House on South Main Street, if you didn't know, at the corner of Bagley and
Okay.
South Main Street. If you remember, Winnie Moss came to us a few years ago and received permission to open a bed and breakfast on the site. You may
okay,
or may not remember that, but it was approved probably in 2016 or 17, okay?
all right,
If you didn't know, Ms. Little already has a facility outside of town, right over there where Mary Slaw was living. And it's a wedding venue, is that right term? And they wanted to expand their offerings with the wedding venue. I think it's called Poplar Hill, is that right? Am I getting this all right? Poplar Hill is out there across from Slaw's Restaurant and where Mary Slaw was living. And they would like to have additional space to house people when they come in for a wedding or an event. Bed and breakfast allows up to 4 units, and they have 7 bedrooms. Okay. Bed and breakfast is smaller, and I'll read you the definitions as you look at me like that.
Well, the Gray Swan has 5.
Huh?
Gray Swan has 5, don't they?
I think they do have 5.
Okay.
I don't know how they have 5, but we will, and Christine has approached me about that already. Bed and breakfast establishment, a home occupation involving the rental of up to 4 rooms, okay, by definition. And I'm not sure when the Gray Swan started, but when I moved here in 1993, it was already here. And the ordinance was adopted in 92, maybe that's what the deal was. And if you go just below that, the definition of a boarding house. And boarding house is probably not the exactly right term, but we do have it already in our ordinance, and it says, a building where for compensation, lodging, or meals are provided for at least 5 and up to 14 persons. And we assume with double occupancy that the 7 bedrooms would be the 14. Okay, so it seemed to fit. We even received a letter from one of your neighbors that said, I don't think that's really the right term, but it's the term we have in our ordinance. Okay, this is, at this point, reserved for the staying on the property and spending the night. I think Megan has a second phase that she would like to bring to us ultimately, to talk about more of a venue where wedding showers could be held, or other things. We'll have a public hearing and she can answer your questions better than I can. So, but what we're talking about right now is to provide the lodging for up to 14 people. Parking would be on-street, or excuse me, off-street, and there is an accommodation for 7 parking spaces to the rear. Okay?
Am I correct, though, in did I see in here where it calls for up to 20,
So what calls up to 20?
that you could have as many as 20 people?
Well, if they, you want to like stand up or anything?
Yeah,
I don't want to be proper.
Come up here on the camera.
Well, I don't do that.
shall we open the public
Public
hearing?
Yes.
Yes.
So that's counting like if they pull out one of the couches, has like a sleeper couch, and then we have like a blow up mattress, like that kind of thing. That's what that is. But I don't think I want 20 people staying there. But originally that was the thought, but I think that might be too many. But that was one of the things I was
I
gonna
think the
address with
permit,
them.
if approved, would For a boarding house, it'd be 14.
Yeah.
That would be the cap.
Yeah, which that would be like you said, like 2 people per room, which would probably be more comfortable for everybody staying there too, unless they wanna like put their kid on the couch or something maybe, but.
Did I note in here that it said up to 20? Yeah, somewhere. Could sleep up to 20.
Correct.
Just
But I
wanna-
can change that. That's
Just
not
want
good.
to clarify, just want to clarify that. Okay.
And this would be throughout, I'm not specifically addressing your place, but this would be throughout the R1 district,
But it is
which,
a conditional use. Each,
As a conditional
each
use.
application will come to you
Okay.
individually, and
Okay.
based on its merit in the R1 district. Is it something that could happen on 9th Street? It could, but only with y'all's and the town council permission. It would not be by right. Somebody couldn't just
It would
open
be
up
in the yellow.
in the
of
yellow
Mhm.
zone.
And so do you want to make a preference on here that up to 14?
I think it
Because
has
that's
to
what
be
the
up
board-
to
yeah,
14.
that's all
I
it
think
would
the
be.
boarding room definition is 14, and with the parking spaces and all that, I think 14 is the number. Okay.
and it would only be,
Yes, sir.
it would only be associated with a wedding that was occurring at your venue?
So ideally, our ultimate goal in the long run is for us to have enough weddings where basically every weekend well, not every weekend, but the majority of our weekends we're booked at Poplar Hill, and then the weddings that are there, their wedding party or whoever they choose, guests, whatever they may need for out of town accommodations between us and Gray Swan could accommodate, because we were trying to keep people in Blackstone. That was our main goal, because right now our weddings, they go to Farmville. So a lot of people, they stay in Airbnbs in Farmville or they go to the hotels. So when we saw Bagley and had the opportunity to buy that, we felt it was a good way to kind of keep as many people in our community as we could.
Good plan.
Yeah. Hopefully it works.
So,
Could I ask this,
Yes, sir.
so I make sure I get it right? Okay, so in other words, if I could get married at your place on
Yes, sir.
then I could plan my wedding party at your place downtown.
No, sir. So the wedding party, like you would actually get married and have your reception on site at Poplar Hill.
Okay,
And then so you would just stay overnight at Bagley is the plan. Now, if you wanted to maybe have, like a baby shower or something later on, you could do that is my hopes later at some point maybe for that kind of thing. But right now our goal is just for accommodations for night stay.
So it wouldn't be open up to the public like a bed and breakfast, is only with the wedding venues that people would be staying there?
Well, no, I would prefer if I'm able to rent it out to more people than just the wedding venues at this time. Like I said, our long-term goal is for us to have enough weddings where we don't need to do that. But in order to pay the house payment that I've been paying for a while, well, it would be nice to, to offer it to out-of-town guests, so. But I do not want to me, I think of it more like when you go to the beach and you rent a house and like your family goes and rents a house. That's how it would be in my head. You're not renting per room. So I don't want 5 different people that don't know each other staying in the house. That's not the goal. You would come and bring your family and your family would stay at the house, not a bunch of different people. So, because I live with Bernie at Poplar Hill, which Poplar Hill is his facility. So I wouldn't reside at Bagley. Unless he doesn't like me later.
Is there anybody else outside interested in this issue?
This lady lives across the street
Oh,
out
okay.
there, so she.
Are you in the White House with the red roof? And when they took the pictures and they went across the street when we did the pictures out there? Oh, well, thank you for letting me do that. I didn't know they were escaping my yard. I apologize for that.
Nobody else?
Okay, do you have any questions or,
No, I mean, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't gonna be something that was like long-term boarding, and it's not going to be, so that's.
No, and see, the boarding, I agree with Philip with that. Like, that really wasn't like the term I probably would have preferred to use. But bed and breakfast didn't fit because there wasn't enough rooms. And I think bed and breakfast, if I'm not mistaken, somebody has to live there in order to kind of be like a mediator. So like I said, I thought of it more of like a vacation rental. And so if we go outside of the wedding people to try to get people to come into town, my other goal would be to try to entice people to come to Blackstone for the different things that we offer in surrounding areas and get them to stay here. and then they can go to High Bridge Trail. They can come in, you know, when we have the festivals and stuff in town to try to get people to come to this area, and they'd have, you know, nice places to stay. But again, it wouldn't be a bunch of different people in the house. They would rent the house, and that's it, not by room. Yeah.
And that's specific, and I think that should be logically a condition, so we don't end up with a Clay's Rest Home. 3 owners down the road, because that started as a rest home for older folks, and we all knew people that stayed there, and now it's a group of people from out of town, and they just rent individual rooms to folks that don't.
I don't plan on doing that.
But I think in order to pin it down, well, not for you, but
Yeah.
when you sell
For
it and you
future.
guys retire and somebody else is running it, that they don't say, you know, I can make more money with state handicap, a facility or something like that.
So we need to
maybe-
put a duration?
Hmm?
We could put a duration
No,
of
what
this
I would
thing?
do is that
Okay.
they have to rent the entire house.
Correct, not by room.
There'd be no individual accommodation made. It'd have to- The
Good
entire
idea.
house has to be rented
Okay.
by a party.
So are you willing to proffer that? Are you willing to
Offer,
do that?
Voluntary offer.
Yes, would you offer to do that?
To what, to just
Only
rent the
to
house?
rent the house as
And not individual rooms.
Yes, that's our goal, yes, sir. Yeah, I don't plan to do individual goals, cause I don't want a bunch of strange people in there and all
We
that
put
stuff
that in the permit now, then we don't have to worry 10 years from now.
later
if
on.
somebody else comes in
Yeah,
and
I mean,
says,
are
"Oh,
you
sorry,
okay
we
with
don't
that?
do that."
Okay.
That's a good idea.
All right.
And I mentioned we have a facility in town,
Mm-hmm.
and it's got some folks that live there and they wander quite a bit. And so the neighbors,
Well, it definitely wouldn't be for handicapped people, unfortunately, because there's a lot of steps. So, like my dad needs knee surgery, and he came by, and poor thing, he was like, you know what, I'm just gonna sit outside.
Any questions?
I need to abstain because I've rented the
I
Bagley
think you
house.
can vote on the text.
Can I vote on the text?
Vote on the
Okay.
text, and then you can abstain.
Okay.
I'll vote on the text and then I'll
Okay.
stay away from the other.
All right.
there'll be 2 votes coming up.
Okay.
The first of which is to allow this in your zoning district, and the second would be specific to your request, now that we've modified the ordinance. And that modification, I do believe, will include a condition that no individual room rentals, it'll have to be entire.
The entire home.
Is that gonna be in the text or the
No,
conditional?
that'll be in the condition.
Okay.
So, can I ask a question?
Yes.
So if we do that, so would I have to come back later and say, you know, say somebody wants to have a baby shower and they want to rent the home,
Well, I think-
would we have to come back and ask for
I
permission for that?
don't think so.
I
Okay.
think the difference is because
I don't think so.
if you're renting the house, I think the issue that we've got is parking, okay? I think we have enough on-site parking to handle this boarding house situation, and that's why we started with this portion, okay? We don't want to encourage the on-street parking. I'm sure we can completely stop at Bagley Street, just not a good spot.
Yeah.
So I
Nobody's
think,
rented us yet.
I think Megan will come back with more, because a boarding house doesn't permit event support. So I think it will take a second series of public hearings when you're ready to do that and have something on parking resolved.
She asked a good question about if she's gonna have a baby shower, would she have to come back to the planning commission to get permission? Now, I know the way we do that with a VFW, you know, if you're gonna, a baby shower, something's only gonna last for a couple of hours,
Yeah.
you know, so.
They're not generally raucous affairs, are they?
Not normally.
No.
But the parking
Parking is an
is a little bit more
issue.
of the issue.
Okay.
Not so much that the parties are gonna get out of hand. You got plenty of parking over at VFW.
Right.
Park 200
I
cars up there
understand,
tomorrow.
yeah.
I think the parking is really the only issue that Megan potentially has with any of her future events that I can see.
So what is the parking requirements for, is it 2 per unit?
Is 2 per unit or 2 per accommodation. She's got 7 bedrooms, or excuse me, it's 1 per accommodation, so she's able to provide 7 spaces, 7 bedrooms. We expect it to be up to 2 people per bedroom, and that's why it fits under boarding house, which is up to 14 people.
So she only has to have 7 parking spaces?
And she's got the.
Okay, all right.
Sounds like they better carpool.
Yeah.
They can park at Poplar Hill. We'll shuttle them. That'll be all right. We'll figure that out.
All right. Any further questions, comments? Okay. All right. Love to hear a motion that we let's see, first of all, we have to approve the text amendment of permitting boarding houses in the R1 residential district as a conditional use.
Also move.
Second.
All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay. All right, and then you'll have to close the public hearing, correct?
We'll close that, and then there's a second public hearing.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're gonna find any more information out, but,
Okay. Second public, and we closed the first one, we'll have a second one regarding the condition, the approval of the conditional use permit of Megan Little. I don't think we need any further information.
I do think you need to include that condition about
Okay,
the,
yes, yeah, we're certainly gonna,
about renting the house out as an entirety and not as individual rooms.
that will certainly be a condition to the conditional use permit, that the building be rented as a whole, not as individual units. Okay. And that's agreeable with Little, so, all right. Now we close that public hearing, and now I can entertain a motion, correct? Okay.
I'll make a motion that we approve the conditional use with the proffer intact.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
And you will abstain from that.
Please.
Yes.
And you'll be back here on the 15th of May. Same place, 7 o'clock.
7 o'clock on
I'll
the
send another round of letters again to the adjoining, she'll get another letter again and let you know the date and time, but that one's gonna be at 7 p.m.
Okay, same place. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, thank y'all, I appreciate it.
Good luck.
Thanks for fixing that house up.
Yeah, sound like a good thing.
Looks like you're doing a very nice restoration.
Yeah.
Do that in all over Blackstone.
People need places to stay during weddings.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. You know that.
Amazing thing to me is how long it's sitting there.
Yeah.
Hey, when you get a chance, you do that.
Left town, kind of turned his back on the property.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think he'd had enough.
Okay, we only had 2 leave, so, and
It's really.
Lance has 3 in his party. And I know that Martha Lee is interested because it's across the
6,
street.
7. Mr. Miller's gonna stick around through this time.
Okay, so how many we got right now?
7,
Okay.
we bring in 4, which is Martha Lee and the 3 people.
Okay. There's another lady here wants to hear about it too.
Open the window.
Do you want to just spread them out? Okay.
Do we go
Spread 'em
sit
out.
outdoors?
I think we're gonna be able to spread people out. So how many of? 6, okay.
Brought enough liquor with him, we wouldn't have to worry about this.
What did you say? What'd you say?
If he brought enough liquor with him, we wouldn't have to worry about it.
That's what we said.
You know Megan, she's from down Mecklenburg somewhere.
Well, I met her when I rented Poplar Hill, and I rented all of that. And then I found out the other night that my cousin was her youth minister in Emporia.
That's right, she's in Memorial now.
Yeah, he just called me the other day and told me.
Y'all gotta spread out now.
Okay, we're still recording. I forgot to cut it off and cut it back on. So
All right,
we're still
thank you.
recording, just so you all know. All right, so that was everybody that was outside.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the consideration of a text amendment to the Town of Blackstone zoning ordinance to permit a distilled spirits plant in the M2 General Industrial District as a conditional use.
Yeah, the condition.
All right?
I'll point to the map very quickly, and the property in question is here. So Planter's Warehouse. I think everybody knows what Planter's Warehouse is. It's in the M2 heavy manufacturing district, or heavy general industrial district, okay? This particular piece of property, though it has M2, our interpretation, or my interpretation of the ordinances are that we take them by an individual case, and there's not a category like a boarding house that we can fit it under, that we need to come back and create a new definition. And in Blackstone, a distilled spirits plant is a new definition. We don't have anything like that, okay? The closest we've come is Dave McCormick got a permit to brew a little beer at the Old Town Shop, if you remember that. He's got,
Very well.
Trapezium Brewing is entitled to make beer there. Again.
Been very disappointed.
That it's not done yet? Yeah. He's coming. He wanted to finish his apartments first, and then he's gonna be coming with the rest. Applicant is Doggett State Distilling Company. The proprietors are here to answer questions. Initially, we have to amend the text to allow, and I think the exact terminology is a distilled spirits plant. And that came out of the definition from the ABC facility. And then, again, it would be a conditional use permit, and any appropriate conditions then could be placed, or any additional proffers could be offered for their specific request. Not only is the request specific to a facility that manufactures, but they also want to have a tasting room and a ABC-approved sales point or retail store. But you would only sell your stuff, right?
Correct.
Okay. So again, 2 public hearings, and if you have any questions, please.
We'll open the public hearing then. And who would like to speak on behalf of the? You've become a frequent flyer.
I tried to put him on the aisle
Yeah.
so he could get up and talk. Just let us, what questions do you have?
First, since you're on camera, will you let everyone who?
My name is Lance Doran. I'm one of the owners of Doggett State Distilling Company.
And what will you be producing there?
We're gonna start with clear alcohol at first. So that is vodka, moonshine, gin. I don't want to isolate ourselves to any one product to start with, because we are, in fact, all new to this. We don't know precisely what immediate direction we want to go in. So, given our left our own desires, it would be moonshine. Would be the first thing that we are personally passionate about producing here. Eventually, this would develop into a product line where bourbon will be brought into, and of course, we all know the aging process. That's several years down the road at the earliest. So that is, I'm not trying to dodge a question, and it's intentionally kind of vague, but that's the direction we're going at first.
Can you describe your process?
Sure.
What's going to happen?
All of the, and I was telling Mr. Branch, a lot of the materials, all the materials we're using are natural. We're going to be sourcing corn, barley, wheat, all of that stuff as local as possible. He and I both have close family friends, and that we want to try to source these grains and things from here in the county, or at least within several miles of the county. So keeping it as local as we can. So all of these grains and these products are brought in. We effectively make a mash out of it, is what it's called. It's like a stew. We heat it. We add some enzymes, naturally occurring enzymes to it to help transition the starches in the mash to sugars, whereby then we add the yeast, which creates a beer, for lack of a better term, which is then put into the distill, and the distilled spirits are the end product. So that briefly is the process through which all this happens. I'd heard that one of the concerns is smell. That's a legitimate concern, but it is also a concern that is very similar to the concern a person would have about a tobacco warehouse. This very distinct smell from a tobacco warehouse, which is a use by right in this zoning, that you're really not going to encounter that smell until you're in the building. A great example is when Lester and I went to visit Davis Valley Distilling Company in Marion, Virginia. He and I both pulled up. We knew it was a very large distillery. Well, by our standards, a large distillery. We knew what it was. We knew what the smell was, and we didn't smell it till we opened the door. So there is a smell involved with it, but it is minimal. It is very isolated, and I would say indiscernible until you're in the building.
How will you use the building? You can use the front, the back, is there a
portion-
drawing yet?
The portion that we are leasing is approximately 10,000 square feet. It is the corner of the building that made the front page of the paper. So that front quarter of that building with the cinder block area out on the side towards Rice or Reese. I don't know how to say
Rice,
it. Rice Manufacturing on that side. It's that first corner to that large bay door is the portion that we have leased. There's currently a petition wall there that was already there. I think a church, if I'm not mistaken, was using it at some point.
Yeah, I think so.
So that is the area that we're gonna be using.
And that's as large an area as it takes up?
I hope not.
Okay.
I hope we need more,
Yeah.
but for starters, there's, you know, in part of our application process to the Tax and Trade Bureau, which is the governing body that permits us to do this from a federal level, we had to kind of spatially lay everything out.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, once we started looking at it, we've got enough space there to start with. I hope we end up with the problem of needing more space, because Mr. Reagan's been very good to work with, and I think is open to us acquiring more space from him, if not all of it.
Could something else rent the rest of the building while you're there?
Something else is currently renting the rest of it.
They are?
Lonnie Smith, Structure Steel Concepts, I think I got his name right. He's currently leasing portion of it, and Joe is storing some of his coffee, water bottling equipment in a back corner as well. So there's currently the owner plus, I guess, 2 leasees there now.
So if y'all went to production of bourbon, let's say, you're gonna have to have rick houses, or a rick house for the storage of the bourbon barrels. Would y'all come back to us when you get to that stage and say, fine, now we need a rick house, which is a little different situation.
Right.
Smell is a little different, and it's just a little different than just storage.
Oh, it absolutely is. And the problem that we're gonna run into with a rick house in that location is the ventilation.
Yep.
And the thermal transfer. So if you know, I don't know why you would know this, a lot of the brick houses in Kentucky, all the places that are famous for their bourbon, they're not at the top of the hill. They're not at the bottom of the hill. They're midway in the hill because it catches the thermal drafts up and down in morning and night. And that helps move the bourbon through the barrel, which allows the oak to work. So our goal would be to find a spot. I mean, I've got a farm, he's got a farm, and it may sound ridiculous, but to barrel that product and store it elsewhere
Yeah,
would be
makes
ideal to us.
sense.
I'm not saying we wouldn't try to do it here, but it's not the optimum situation for us. I'm speaking for all of us here, but do you agree with that?
Yeah, and some of them actually move it because of heat. In other words, some of them move the barrels up and down. to
Right.
Different heights. Some of them don't move them at all. Some of them leave them in place and do not move. Yeah, and some of them move to some,
every day.
and a few of them are not moved at all. They leave them in the shelving and leave it where it is till it's mature.
We
That's
heard
it.
a story of a gentleman who was so distraught and bothered by why his bourbon was so poor. He was storing his barrels in his air-conditioned facility.
Wow.
Wondering why he was, anyway, it wasn't getting any transfer. The barrels weren't working, so
Yeah.
we're not doing that. But our intention, Tommy, would be to move them elsewhere.
Okay.
If that process.
How long would it take for your product to be ready? I mean, I'm not a bourbon drinker, but you hear about aged and those kinds of things. Is what you're proposing to be able to make, is it years down the road before it's a product that can be?
The earliest is 2 years, right? By legal definition of Tax and Trade Bureau, we have to have it in a barrel for 2 years for it to be considered bourbon.
How about the clear alcohol?
Clear alcohol, it comes out to still and we send it out the door.
Ready to go.
That is that's why that's our original focus, because it's instant revenue stream. We're gonna start off with this thing in the red. We're gonna try to get it to the black as quick as we can. The whole time also being able to set aside and kind of focus on our passion, the different craft portions of what we wanna do.
Quite.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, this is not my ward, but some people have asked me a few questions.
Sure.
My first question is, I heard you say that there was very little opening. Now, what would happen if this odor became too strong for the citizens that live there? Do you have a plan for that?
I don't. And the only reason I don't is because I don't believe there's a situation where if you're not trespassing, you don't have a problem. And that's my personal opinion. That's why I haven't. When Lester and I went to visit that distillery in Marion, and we walked up, and I was looking for these kind of things. That what impact? I mean, it was a beautiful facility, sitting in the middle of a vineyard. This guy ran a winery. and we're looking for this problem. I know what it smells like, and I'm looking for it, and I can't find it, and I'm standing outside the building.
Yeah, because I worked in Petersburg for 28 years. I used to go by Pocahontas over there where they used to make Richard's Wild,
Right.
Ice Rose, and it does have an odor.
It does, that's right.
Okay, my second question is, do you plan to employ locally or
Oh, yes, sir, absolutely.
how many jobs do you think you'll have?
Well, we think, I mean, I'm trying to be realistic. It's gonna start off with these two yucks here. And then, but if we're able to develop it, I don't see why 10 people is an unrealistic number. I hope we have that problem, because at the end of the day, employment or offering employment to somebody, and a lot of you guys understand this, that means we're making money.
Right.
That means we're being successful. And we can share that success with these other folks. So I hope we can very quickly employ that many people.
Mr. Miller is on town council.
Okay.
I mean, the, one way that could be handled, if we don't have a specific threshold, with noise, we got decibels, with other things, we have a measurement with this. And I would recommend the planning commission to consider is to have some sort of a review period. After 180 days or something like that, if the odor is becoming a problem, then we need to come back and revisit the permit.
I mean, we can make it less than that. I mean, whatever works. I mean,
From whatever the time is where you get started.
right.
If there is an apparent odor during that period and Lance has to come back, is there something, any type of HVAC system or any type of,
The answer to that is absolutely.
Oh.
There are air scrubbers out there that will take, now, is it so cost prohibitive that it prevents us from being able to do it? I can't answer that.
Right.
question. There are air scrubber systems out there that will take any odor out of anything.
but if you're successful and it's going well but there's an odor problem there, we have a solution for you in that building some way.
And like Lester said, it may not be something we can afford to do and stay here, but it certainly is.
They are there, they're available.
There's bound to be. I mean, anyway.
I've welded in the emergency room at Shebang Hospital, where there were little people in,
Yeah.
people in out there anyways, and you couldn't smell it, so the HEPA-vac and air filtration systems are there.
But I think the only odor that you have in that operation would be during the mash
The
process.
fermenters, yes, sir.
I don't think that, other than that, and I don't think you'd have any odor other than that. And I don't,
There's also ways, in the production process, there's ways for us to limit that.
Yeah.
And they are in line with increased productivity as well. For instance, if we seal our fermenters and put an airlock on them so that only the carbon dioxide from the process, the interaction between the sugar and the yeast creates alcohol, which stays in the mash, and carbon dioxide. So if we put an airlock on that, then the only exposed portion of that is carbon dioxide coming out. So there's things I think we could
Yeah.
do in the production side that would increase our production and limit, that potential.
Interference.
And the facility is large enough that we could transfer the mash, as far as disposing of the mash, that could be transferred to the vehicle with closed doors. I mean, you could, the entire, which was not the case in Marion.
No.
It was exterior loading, and you still couldn't smell it.
did y'all go to the Virginia distillery on the other side of Charlottesville by any chance?
No, sir. I've heard of it, but we
That's
haven't.
probably, my guess is the largest in the state, and I was up there, I just didn't notice anything that,
I'm not, and that's what, when I
well,
met
it
with-
may not have been in production either, so
It
I
may
don't
be
know.
so.
But
And when I met with Miss Lee earlier this week, and that was one of her concerns, was the smell. And I said, Miss Lee, I'm not gonna lie to you, there is a smell. I think you'll find it. I think you won't find it. It was my point, but I think you'll find it. It's very, outside of the building would be very, very difficult to pick up.
You had a question, ma'am?
Yes, my name is Martha Lee. I live directly in front of the building, and I have talked to him, and my concern was with all the senior citizens on the street. We already have Reese and the other place down the street there, the railroad track, and all, most of all of us have upper respiratory problems, heart diseases and stuff. We're senior citizens, put it that way. And, that's what our concern is. This is one of the ladies back here too that lives right there. And, we was just trying to figure out, for our health. And I also asked him about coming through 460 and coming up Barker Road and coming to the back to cut down some of, you know, the big trucks and everything. I asked, would they be able to put a fence up around it? Because I could almost stand in my front door and spit in their door. This is how close I am there to that. And, you know, we have little babies, you know, grandbabies and everything running around. But we're mainly, you know, concerned for our health. And we have children with bad, you know, with upper respiratory health and stuff also. And like you say, Dad, he's guaranteed that it won't be none. But, you know, like you say, suppose it do occur and somebody actually gets sick from this. I mean, there's always a hazard for that. And then I worry about you see it on the news where alcohol and stuff, they buildings, they explode. That means, tell me goodbye, I'm gone. There ain't no more of my Felicia, she's out.
Ms. Lee, one of the considerations that we made early on was with the building inspector. And we determined, and the building inspector, Dean, confirmed that this is a, oh Lord, now I forgot it, is it a group? I or F? F2, group F2 building classification. So hazardous materials are stored here. Because, I mean, let's face it, 120 proof alcohol is considered hazardous material. It is stored in food grade totes of some types, closed totes. The size and quantity of the material we're keeping puts us below the threshold that requires any fire suppression for it. The fact that all of the containers are closed and individually sealed puts us in a much lower risk classification for hazardous material. So, can it happen? Sure, sure can. One of the fact that they are closed containers, and the fact that there's no open flame here. This is all bain-marie or boiler heat. There's no open flames. Not to say that some yahoo can't walk in there with a cigarette, light it up, and cause a problem for everybody, but that's our job to ensure that. And we don't nobody want that any, or doesn't. We don't want that any less. I can't even say it. We don't want that. We don't want it real bad. Because it's right. I mean, it's going to hurt the community, and it's going to hurt people. That's important to us.
And I be walking all night long.
You be haunting me. I don't want you
I
haunting
be
me.
walking all night long, peeping out the window. And it's that noise. I do it now.
As far as making somebody sick, Martha, it's the purest water that you could imagine. It's edible corn, it's edible barley, it's food grade sugar, cooked in a 400 gallon, 800 gallon, 900 gallon pot. You could eat it. It is all food stuffs.
You two guys gonna be doing this.
Yes, ma'am.
Y'all know what y'all doing.
Yes, ma'am.
We never done that before, right?
But if it
It's
makes,
not legal to do this under the law, Ms. Lee.
How many distilleries have opened in Virginia in the past 10 years, for example?
There has been a boom in it.
That's what I
I
understand.
don't know the number, and I don't know. There's been a lot. I mean, there's one in Amelia, right?
One in Powhatan.
Powhatan, I mean, Three Crosses. There's several in Charlottesville, the Silverback, and then the Virginia Distillery. There's two that I know of in Richmond.
There are 960 some in the country right now.
Right.
Registered.
So I mean, by default, you just do the math.
now this is
You
one
can make
thing,
it some hand sanitizer.
one thing that
too.
might make them feel a little bit better in the fact that there is a distillery in the Cavalier Hotel at Virginia Beach, inside the hotel.
It's not a real low-end kind of hotel,
I
is it?
didn't know that.
No, but, and I'll say this, they had to get special permission from the General Assembly to put it in because it was classified as a residential area. They classified the hotel as residential. But for them to allow that in the Cavalier Hotel, I think it's kind of interesting. That put it right in the middle of the city, as well as right in the middle of a hotel that they just invested a ton of money in. So I think that's something that might make you feel a little better, I don't know, but it's right inside the hotel.
Yeah, we're classified as residential also.
Yes, ma'am. That's right.
So are you gonna check on the street that come off of 460 that comes to the back
We'll
Y'all
be,
be on the loading docks or what?
the loading dock on the side, everything will be leaving out of the side entrance there.
So come up that little hill with your truck.
I guess so, yes, ma'am. And I'm open to doing whatever whatever road VDOT allows us to drive on. If that's a flyover that comes off of 460, I'm game. But I'm telling you, that's an expensive proposition to go, to start down that road. We would gladly use it to limit and mitigate the impact of the community. But we, under no circumstance, have got away.
I like work there.
Do what now?
I like work there.
Yes.
Does it already have an entrance on the Palmer Place?
That is the street between, right, Reese? No, it does not. That was the first thing that I was.
Well, maybe one thing that may find some common ground or middle ground is that deliveries would come off the Palmer Place. Maybe put some sort of an entrance to town. You don't have to satisfy VDOT, but maybe Jason Walker putting in some turns. You wouldn't, by ordinance, wouldn't have to pave it. Maybe deliveries don't sit there and try to make turns in front of her place. Maybe they come in off Palmer Place and do the thing.
We spent 2 full days at a distillery. It does $8 million worth of sales a year. They produce 1,000 gallons of 160 proof alcohol a day. And in those 2 days, no delivery came, no delivery left. There's not, I was telling to say that if we're insanely successful, there might be 3 trucks a week, maybe. And, I mean, it's not high traffic. It doesn't take a lot of traffic.
Yeah, I was thinking that wouldn't generate nearly the traffic, say, of Circle Sales, which is moving beer and wine out on a daily basis.
Yes, sir.
And that's, you can fit a lot of liquor in a tractor trailer. And because of where it's going directly from our facility to the Virginia ABC warehouse. And there's no in between. Yes, sir.
Will you be having tours of it?
Yes, sir. We would like to have tastings and yes, sir.
Only thing I can say is, educate the people, let them know what's going on. And I think you're gonna be all right.
Okay, thank you. And it's important to us because, I mean, I don't know that this is one of the most regulated industries in the country, but I'd be surprised if it's not. There's a lot of people that have got their fingers very deep in this. This industry, just in Virginia, created over $1 billion worth of revenue last year. Virginia ABC in the month of March, month-to-month comparison, was up 73%. And I think that's got a little bit to do with this thing. But there's a lot of revenue being created for the state of Virginia that goes directly into the general fund of Virginia, the General Assembly in Virginia. And let's face it, I mean, that money is going to be spent and it's going to come from somewhere. We just want an opportunity to bring it to Blackstone.
Would it bother people with oxygen, that's on oxygen?
Yes, ma'am.
Would it bother people that's on oxygen constantly 24 hours a day?
I can't speak to that. I can't imagine it would, but I don't know that I'm really qualified to give you a hard and fast answer.
Yes, we have one on the street with oxygen 24 hours a day. She's about 80 years old.
Right.
And she's on oxygen all day.
I don't see where it would harm anybody. I don't. I mean,
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Would you state your name, please?
Good afternoon to everyone. My name is Ivor Branch. What I'm gonna say is not gonna make people happy tonight, okay? Just throw that out there in front. Because personally, I am opposed to having a spirits facility within my residential neighborhood. In my neighborhood, we have families of senior citizens, as well as families with school-aged children, and it's also in close proximity to 3 churches in our neighborhood. We have senior citizens who have health issues and some with physical challenges and are basically homebound on a full-time basis. For our families with school-aged children, I don't believe that a spirits facility in the neighborhood is going to set a good example for our kids. And I feel that that kind of message is in opposition to the teachings of the churches in our neighborhood and churches in general. In addition, I'm concerned that currently we have 4 business operations already within our neighborhood, in addition to a set of train tracks that runs directly behind all of our properties. And that's not good for the environment. I'm concerned about the various fumes and the pollutants from those businesses that are already there, and as it relates to our breathing on a daily basis. we have no idea of the full extent of those pollutants on our environment, on top of the health issues that we currently endure. I'm concerned that placing a distillery in our neighborhood will create further pollutants into our neighborhood environment, maybe not immediately, but possibly further down the road. In our neighborhood environment, contaminating our breathing, as well as trash pollutants from the possibility of, if there at some point be drainage particles from the distillery. Also, I'm concerned about it creating noise on our street from an increased traffic flow of trucks as well as other vehicles throughout the neighborhood. I'm concerned about the hours of the operation of the distillery and the kind of patrons who will be attracted by the distillery once it gets to the tasting room and the tasting event portion of it. And I'm also concerned about the possible decrease in property values of our homes already in the neighborhood. So I'm here tonight to say that I am opposed to the Spirits Distillery within our residential neighborhood. Thank you for your time.
Further comments? Any questions, statements? Okay.
Did I hear something?
Yes, sir. Hold on. I do have one.
Sure.
We're not building a bar. Virginia law, as it applies to distilled spirits, is not similar to Virginia law as it applies to wine and vineyards. You can go to a vineyard, you can taste 4 wines, you can buy a bottle of wine, you can go outside, you can sit at the table and drink that wine. Distilled spirits don't work that way. You can taste 3.5 ounces. And once you've had that 3.5 ounces, you can buy what you want, but you have to leave with it. You cannot consume any more alcohol on that property for a 24-hour period beyond that 3.5 ounces, which is just considered to be a tasting. So we're not building a club, we're not building a bar.
How often would you think you'd have tastings?
That's hard to say. I would love to think that we might have one every weekend, but we may have 2 and decide that it's just not profitable. At which point we would just be an on-site ABC store and a manufacturing facility. I mean, we're not. I'm sorry,
And
that
this-
sounded like I had answered that question.
And none of this, the tasting situation, that's not on the honor system, by the way. Virginia ABC and Tax and Trade Bureau have very specific guidelines and documentation of how we use our inventories, what does and doesn't leave the bonded premises. So there's a lot of things like that that's not just simply on, oh, we said so, it's we gotta show so on this. So there is some supporting documentation and penalties that they can levy against us if these rules aren't adhered to.
And generally speaking, I think the clientele that will come to distilleries, and boy, this is a very general statement, is not going to be a clientele that in general terms is going to be over drinking. I think in general terms, they're trying out something to taste to perhaps buy later. It's almost like a winery. We're going to try this wine to see if we like it. If we like it, we'll buy some later or take some home. I don't think people are going to go into these distillery operations and intentionally overdrink. I don't think that's generally the nature of that. They would more than likely do that in a bar setting than they would in a distillery setting.
And a bar's open at 2 o'clock in the morning. He and I are at home asleep at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Well, also, I think in a bar setting, they're going to be served, generally speaking, more than they would be served in a distillery operation, a tasting room. And I think the fact in a distillery, the limits are going to be more closely observed, because it's serious in a bar, but it is super serious in a distillery operation, because you could shut down the entire operation.
I would like to just speak on the, because you brought up the ideas of it being in the area of a church and young children. We are the parents of very young children, 2 and 8. Some of your ideas and thoughts have been some that I have brought to him. To know these 2 men, 2 words that come to my mind are honesty and integrity. and the care of my children being 100% always his priority. And I can guarantee, that's an absolute term, like a promise, that anything that would be unsafe for my children just wouldn't happen. Or that I thought was a bad influence on my children, just wouldn't happen. I wouldn't sit here today. He knows that, our friend. My children are always my top concern, I guarantee that.
I'm a close third.
My father's a Baptist minister. My father's a minister and my mother is the treasurer of our church, so I gotta be very careful what I do.
Yeah.
And I can appreciate all of that, but in addition to that, this is what I would like to know. How would you feel about having that located across from your home in your community? Would you be happy with that?
Ms. Branch, this has been a passion of mine, and I'm actually gonna answer your question, I'm gonna give you a little backstory. This has been a desire of mine since he and I were in college together, back 2000. I have almost done this at my house twice. Now, I live in the country out on Hungrytown Road, and it's us and the pine trees. But it's easy for me to say, and you're kinda asking the wrong guy. But no, if I knew he and I were running it, no man, I got no issue whatsoever with these two men running something across from your house. And you're kinda asking a car salesman if you need a car, right? Okay, so, I understand, but I'm trying to be as honest with you as I can. I know what our intentions are, and you don't know me, and I don't know you. And your criticism and your apprehension is fair.
Yes, absolutely fair.
But I think what you'll find, I hope you find that our success and our growth in that part of the community, that will be an asset to all of you guys, not just you two ladies, but the entire area. I hope that we do have, we've joked about it, my daughter's on a little softball team. We've joked about having practices inside the warehouse. Are you talking about wanting something for the kids? It's those kind of things. I would love to think that we could shut half of that facility down twice a month and host some kind of softball tournament or something where the kids get, I would love that. But the only way, ladies, the only way that can happen is if we are successful. Because if there was money in skating rinks and softball teams, they'd be everywhere. We have to do something to generate revenue responsibly, to give us the means by which we can do things in the community, where we can be taxed. You know, this is going to enable, I hope that we are able to create the kind of a facility that Mr. Cox is running in Marion, Virginia, generate $8 million worth of revenue. Is there another company in the town that generates that much revenue? Aside from Walmart and Food Lion, maybe? I mean, that's pie in the sky right now. That's a goal and that's a dream, but it's possible. I hope that tax base is there to make other improvements elsewhere, and that gives us the revenue to do nice things in the community.
You be making some rock and stuff like that?
No, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I'm not making his stuff, but we'll be making ours. We're not gonna call it Ciroc.
Okay, so I can walk out my house, if it's snowing, ice, I can slide on across the street and buy me a bottle and go back home?
If it's during business hours,
For real?
it would be just like the retail location would be identical to an ABC store that only sells our stuff. So from 9 to 7, is it now? I don't know the hours now.
Oh, I don't know.
We would be allowed to be open, whether we choose to be open during those times is entirely up to us. But we can't be open at midnight. You know, we can't have a bunch of kids from Hampton, Sydney show up and say, hey man, we want some vodka. Sell us some vodka at midnight. No man, we can't do that.
As far as tastings, that's a Saturday afternoon event only.
Are you insinuating that Hampton Sydney are inclined to do that?
Who do you want to pick on? UVA, Longwood, who do you want?
I didn't know that they would be able to buy the alcohol or whatever. We already have one liquor store in this little small town. We got enough problems now.
Well, Miss Lee, I think you'd be disingenuous to think that another retail location a mile away is going to cause people to buy more.
Yeah, we don't
I
need
just
that
want them to
though.
buy mine.
Yeah, we don't need them to buy more. That gives them more to do and more to get in trouble, to fall out in the street, go home, want to beat the wives up, whatever. We don't need that.
But it sounds like we've got a personal responsibility problem, not a liquor problem there, in my view.
alcohol, people do stuff when they get alcohol.
But they're gonna find it. If they're looking for it, Ms. Moore, you know they're gonna find it.
Yeah, but we ain't trying to give them nowhere to go exactly what that is.
Your tastings, are they free or are you charging for the tastings?
You charge the tax.
So that eliminates some of the problem.
There's not just a walk up.
Ordering in to taste.
There's no, yeah, we
or whatever they
don't,
say.
transient bourbon tasters are not welcome.
I have another concern.
Yes, ma'am.
You were making reference to a facility that's in, did you say Marion, Virginia?
Yes, ma'am.
My question is that facility in a residential neighborhood?
No, ma'am. He started his facility in the middle of an existing and successful venue, and has since shut his venue down. He doesn't, his vines are bush hogs, they're done. He's just doing this now.
We didn't have another spot in Blackstone besides a residential area with all the churches and all the senior citizens and all the children.
I think, and Philip, I think what Philip's getting ready to say, if I can interrupt him, the spot, you ladies are exactly right, where you live is a residential area. Maybe the misconception is, across the center line of that road, that is heavy manufacturing, correct? By use by right, I could put a log mill right there.
A what day?
A log, I could put a logging mill right there, another one if I wanted to. So, I understand your concerns, but the impact, what we are proposing to do, the impacts here are far less reaching and far potentially more profitable than just about anything I can conceive of that could go in that same space. Use by right, I don't have to ask these people anything. I just start building it. So I feel like we've been very responsible in how we're trying to address this. And Philip has been very diligent in he had to make a determination whether or not we even need to be standing here. And he said, Lance, I know you're not gonna wanna hear it. And I fussed at him, I had to call him back and apologize. But he said, we need to do this, we need to set this up the right way. But he's trying to be responsible about it.
You ever been up to Burkeville and seen what Buckstone looks like?
Outside the street.
That big pile of gravel? He wouldn't have
With
to
the-
ask for a permit to put that there.
With the blasting.
As long as he put it in my yard and straighten my yard out, I might
Asphalt plant, like, making asphalt?
make my yard.
You're talking about the smell, Ms. Martha. Go ahead and get your asphalt.
That is stink.
I know that's what it smells like.
That smells good.
Steel fabricating concrete plant, they can put a concrete plant over there. Not that
No,
they
y'all
would.
got plenty of land down the street
No,
doing
the
nothing.
problem is, if you've been following along, Southside Electric has determined that they're not gonna provide three-phase service.
Been following
This
that
building's
for
on
a
the
while.
town power. That's why the industrial park can't really expand.
What happened to the motel, the apartments?
Pardon?
What happened to the apartments?
Apartments?
Yeah, once apartments supposed to be coming down the street.
Somebody else bought the property.
Yeah,
that's
somebody
all.
else bought the property,
Nothing
now
else
it's just
is
gonna be
happen.
a farm. But we've been working for several years on the
All that
industrial park,
headaches.
trying to work with Southside Electric in order for us to get three-phase power for Frank Carlo's building, which is already there. The town-
Which is a quarter-mile away.
Yeah, but you're on in town territory. Whereas this, now the town's industrial park, it's just not an industrial park anymore because we can't provide power to it. Southside Electric wants $455,000 to run a three-phase line in there, and it's just impractical, you can't do it. The town doesn't charge that kind of thing because it's ridiculous, that's how we do it. We don't have an industrial park, but this is property that is owned by Taylor Ramsey. You guys lived over there a long time, that's a smoky thing.
Yes,
It's
yes.
it's not operating anymore, that's gone.
What they doing over there?
Nothing, it's just empty now, they're not operating, okay? So, there's less fumes from that. And really, our industrial park is much more compressed than all that land back there, because we can't get commercial grade power in the industrial park. I guess Southside Electric is just chosen not to support commerce, I guess. I don't know what they're thinking here, but that's the thing. And, they can tell me all the rules, but this is one of the few manufacturing sites on town. And honestly, I don't know if they would ever do it, but that property would permit a concrete plant to be put with no permit. They walk in there and put it up tomorrow.
I'm gonna have to do some hard work.
An asphalt plant, but that property's been done that way for 30 years. That was the original, part of the original industrial park when Reese Manufacturing purchased their site. And asphalt, brick manufacturing, ever been down to Lawrenceville Brick and seen what they're doing? That's a permitted use by right. So I think that,
Can you explain permitted use by right?
our ordinance is divided up into several zoning districts. If you look at our map, we got different color-coded districts, okay? Martha, you live right in, some of these little green lots right here, which is R2, which is a zoning classification that allows single family, and it allows duplex, and it will allow certain types of townhouse. Looks like an apartment, but not really an apartment, okay? Across the street, you have industrial. Up near Spring Hill Church, I don't know if people know that, that's zoned industrial as well, okay? R1, that old farm up there that was purchased, that people were gonna put those apartments there. The property we just discussed in the case previous to this, that has R1 zoning. So we have different classifications. Each classification has two types of activities. One of which is use by right, which means we recognize this is an appropriate place for a concrete plant, or an asphalt plant, or brick manufacturer. The reason they're here today is because when I sat down with Tessie, and I said, Tessie, are we allowed to regulate this? And there are some documentations that say the locality cannot generate regulations.
Who is Tessie, just to?
Tessie's our attorney, so everybody knows, and a town attorney. However, if you read the first page of this document, that ABC puts out, the reason we're here tonight is because the first sentence says, you gotta check with your local authorities and see if the zoning is appropriate. That's the only reason we're here tonight. I think the alternative, and I don't know of anybody else that's come to me and said, well, if you don't let these guys do it, I'm gonna do this. There's nothing like that on the table. No one come to me about building a concrete plant or asphalt plant, but that property was designated probably in the 80s. You guys remember? When Reese Manufacturing got started?
But what I'm getting around to is, the use by right, which he's doing a good job of explaining, they wouldn't be here at all.
If it were used by right.
They would just go out and do whatever they want to do without even asking. They don't have to ask.
So those
They have
activities
the
we
right to
talked
do
about
that.
that smell pretty bad, asphalt plant, nobody can say that's a gravel quarry, that's not, that's dust, and those are used by right. They can come in and just come get a zoning permit or whatever and move on. They don't have to come to these guys. But because distilling is not specifically detailed anywhere in our ordinance, we brought them here tonight. Okay? I think the property and Reese Manufacturing was here in the early 80s, mid-80s. The old timer guys that they may remember, I don't know, I'm old enough to remember it, but nonetheless, that property's been zoned for concrete plants and asphalt plants and rock quarries since probably the mid-80s, I would say. I moved here in 93 and I've been here for quite some time. You'll remember how old. You might remember.
It's been here, and the warehouse, because the warehouse started as tobacco warehouse.
Tobacco warehouse.
It have been everything.
Mhm.
And the big success was the skating rink. For the kids, I would come home on weekends, and I would hear them, look at that over there. The kids be over there having a ball on Fridays and Saturdays.
They roller skated in there too, didn't they? They did roller skating and stuff. in there.
Yeah, they roller skated.
That's what she just said.
Yeah.
So Ms. Lee, if we just employed a bunch of children to do this and made a bunch of noise and had a bunch of bad smells, you wouldn't care?
It'll be a problem if the children are with alcohol.
I'm teasing you.
And the second part of Tommy's question was, if it's not a use by right, then it has to be listed as a use by conditional use or use by special exception. And so the request today is to add this as a use by special exception, so conditions can be put on it. Because if it's used by right, there's not a specific hour of operation. Somebody could conceivably put up a concrete plant over there and run that sucker 24 hours a day. And by our ordinance, that would be legal. Okay? The reason we do a conditional use is that we can sit down and have this discussion and say, by 7 o'clock or 9 o'clock, we're gonna be closed. And our parking is gonna be such, and we can put proper conditions on the activity so that you guys have some understanding that it's not gonna be open at 11 o'clock at night, people come up there and drinking.
I hope we have security to come around there and check it.
That would be one of the things that would come up in the proffered part of it. If during your events, you'll have some sort of, and Martha had asked me about it previously.
I've got a question for you gentlemen. And Philip mentioned previously maybe revisiting the conditional use permit in 180 days. Of course, you'd be putting a lot of money into your operation. is that something you'd be willing to do? You know, basically, we're looking at the smell issue.
I wanna tell you.
I mean, I under-
There's conditions
that-
on what we're revisiting.
Yeah,
In other words, I'm not gonna spend $200,000 on.
I
a
understand.
Come in here and you got,
Sure.
I would change their mind, and I'm gonna say, well, there's
Yeah.
$200,000 that I spent.
sure.
And I wanna tell you.
I got you right.
I wanna
Yeah.
tell you no.
Uh-huh.
But there's a part of me, and I'm speaking for all of us, that believes that this is a good thing enough to say, you know what, with some conditions to it, that this isn't just a carte blanche, we come in and just completely
The
change.
odor, right?
Well, in a lot of ways, yeah, I'm just talking about the odor. In a lot of ways, you're protecting the property from some uses
Something more
that
invasive
could be,
coming in there.
yeah, far nastier. And what, I'm not saying yours is nasty, yours is actually, considering it was used to house tobacco, which, if you want to talk about a product which has caused a lot of health problems, but that's why, yeah,
I think we could, without nailing down precisely what the conditions would be to it.
Sure.
I can't tell you no right
Yeah.
now. Certainly not with talking with Lester and my wife and his wife
Right.
about it. And I don't know what the right venue for that discussion would be. Maybe it's with Philip. I don't know, but we'd be willing to consider discussing that, revisiting that.
But I have a feeling, knowing y'all, and I've said this before in other contexts, but I think if your neighbors had a problem and came to y'all, y'all would try to address the problem. I just know that. Am I right?
I think you're right, but
I mean,
I think
if
you're
the-
asking the wrong guy. I
No,
mean,
but I think the odor aspect of this is gonna be very minor. I personally believe it's gonna be very minor. But I think if they had a problem and you felt like you could address it within some reasonable fashion, you would do so.
I would agree with that.
And I think being a good neighbor here is probably important, so I'll leave it at that.
I agree.
But I think this distillery operation in of itself, I just don't, I don't think it's a very harmful operation in and of itself. I really don't. And I visited the Virginia distillery. Now, they may not have been operating that day fully, tasting room. I didn't notice any smell from it. And even the rick houses filled with bourbon. Now, granted, you can get up close to one, but you're not going to smell it far away. I mean, it's those, and they're storing bourbon, and they're aging bourbon. So they're supposed to, and by the way, alcohol is coming out of the barrels. So you're actually getting some smell from that. But that's why I asked about the rick houses. The only reason I asked about that is exactly what we're discussing, is the odor. Because that does, obviously, the moisture comes through those oak barrels. And so you need to kind of get those maybe separated from this operation. So I'll leave it, but I'm gonna leave it at that. That's enough.
All right. Anything further?
I don't have anything to add.
Okay.
You have a question?
I was just wondering, Philip, you know, because there's been so many distilleries open, did you research the issue at
I
all?
gotta admit, I know that there are several up in Fauquier County and in that general Northern Virginia zone. I think you talked to some of the local officials there. I have not. I can, certainly before council meeting, I can call some of the other town managers.
Yeah, I was just wondering,
City
what
administrators.
were their experiences with them
I have
in
not called.
other towns?
I
Check with your colleagues on that.
see what my colleagues had to say.
Yeah.
But I will tell you this, as Morgan and I both did the same type of work, we received a lot of correspondence and VML magazines, and it hasn't been a front burner issue in Virginia that it's fallen on disfavor because of issues that have been brought up. The state hasn't come back on.
That was my sense of it.
Lester's daughter's I don't want to state it wrong. You tell her, what does she do? She's
Right now, she's a city planner in Suffolk, so since she got.
similar kind of thing. Has she seen anything or mentioned anything like that?
We haven't been given any directive from
Okay.
the state.
All right.
Look out for this or be cautious about that.
Okay.
I would compare the situation to a situation that I observed back in the early 90s. And this was when they wanted to construct Brentwood Apartments on South High Street. And there were several dilapidated houses on that side of the street. And the property owners on the other side of the street voiced opposition to those apartments coming. But then after they came, those same property owners, they came and said it really improved the community and it became an asset to the town. And I can see some similarities with this situation. You have a commercial building there that could potentially be turned into something much more invasive to the residential section on the other side of the street. But if your operation became a success, it could keep something from more invasive and being more detrimental to the residential property owners than could happen
We
otherwise.
could fill the void before something.
That's what I'm
And I
not
think
thinking.
Mr. Nash, a great example of that is precisely what I stood here and asked you guys 4 years ago when we needed to rezone for our office for Dorn Landscape. That was a rat's nest. And Mr. Tom Jones came in here and he didn't want it, and he was right upset about it. But we cleaned it up. We made it, y'all all seen it, driven by it. Tom now stops by, we speak to each other every morning. He brings my daughter, he actually gives them to my dad to make sure that my dad gives them to my kids and gets the credit for it. He walks by, yeah, I'm sorry. Lollipop. So it's a great example of exactly that. We were able to take a part of town, and not that that's a rundown part of town at all, it's a very nice part of town, but where our shop is now, was dilapidated. It needed a lot of help, and we've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars over there and made it something that is an asset to this community. And I think you're exactly right. I think we're looking to do the exact same thing here.
Okay.
First action is a text amendment for consideration.
Okay.
You wanna close the public hearing?
We would like to close the public hearing on that issue. So if we wish to amend the Blackstone zoning ordinance to permit a distilled spirit plant, spirits plant in the M2 General Industrial District as a conditional use, I would like a motion to that effect.
So
I'll make
moved.
a motion. that we
Okay.
do that.
I'll second.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay.
Item number 2, we can go through the formality of opening the public hearing. I think we've heard, unless there's anything those in attendance would like to add to the discussion, but this formality, if you want to open it and ask if anybody.
And can I just say one little thing? I think it's a good idea. It's got to go to town council anyway. We just make a recommendation. As has been said in the
Coming to
past,
town
they,
council on the 18th of May.
As it has been said in the past,
Yes,
they do
yes.
not have to
yes,
abide by our
they can
decision.
ignore us totally, which is okay.
It's the way it works.
Simply making a recommendation to town council.
Right.
They, if we voted against it, they could still take it up and approve it.
Still do.
Yeah. But I was gonna also say, given what, I thought Dennis had a good idea, and that is, in the meantime, if you will please call a couple of other localities to find out if they've had any difficulty, so you can relay that to town council prior to the vote.
I would like to make one comment since I've stayed quiet the whole time. People that go into this industry, and we had the same discussions with the tap rooms and the wineries and all, people that go out and risk to go in these industries are not fly-by-night. I don't want to call anybody a low-rent person, but they're business people. They're going into it for a business. If you'll remember, about 4 weeks ago, I believe, one of the distilleries in outside in Powhatan turned their industry from making drinking alcohol to hand sanitizer because there was a shortage. I think you're going to find that's the type of person that would open an industry, because it's a lot of money and it's a lot of respect that they want from the industries that actually regulate them. I think you'll see it's not the carousing type. It's a business inside this that I doubt very many people will really ever know a lot about what goes on in there until you actually have the opening for, a tasting or something. It's still not going to be out with neon signs saying bar, bar, bar. I think you're going to find this is an industry that's more of a business plan.
More
than-
akin to a laboratory than
Yeah.
a,
I think you'll find that people go into this are people that have a lot of respect for other people. It's just my opinion on it.
All right. So we
Open the second public.
We opened the second public hearing, but we have received all the information, I believe, and given everybody the opportunity to make all the comments and questions they wished. So we'll go ahead and close that public hearing.
Are y'all adding any proffers or anything? Any conditions?
No, I don't propose.
They didn't offer it.
Yeah.
Motion?
Yes.
I so move.
Okay. That we approve the conditional use permit for,
As stated in the application,
Okay.
no proffers.
all right. We have a motion.
Second.
All right, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All right,
We have one more item on the agenda, and I'll go get you.
okay.
You all will get another round of letters again, the council.
Thank all of you
make
for your
the final
time.
decision on
Appreciate
whether
it.
it's
Thank you.
specifically referred to there.
We got elbow bump. Nice to meet you.
Thanks for trying to bring some money in.
Planning commission, or not planning commission, but comprehensive
My
plan.
comprehensive plan. You wanna hear about it?
Yeah, I'll bring you about.
Okay.
This
Yeah.
should not take long, gentlemen. Hey, Josh, come on, you're up.
We are still recording, just for y'all's information.
Thank you.
Tell you one
Yes.
thing, when you can have one inside the Cavalier Hotel, inside the hotel, seriously.
Ever been to Reedville, Virginia? I frequent Reedville, Virginia. And when that fish plant is cooking, my God, that is the worst. It makes you wish for a paper plant.
I have never been to Reedville.
No.
All right, at y'all's desk is
All right.
this draft comp plan
Okay.
that Josh has been working on. And Laurel,
You know Josh, don't you?
He's presented before.
he's our transit director.
Okay.
He's kind of the replacement for Jennifer Beck when she would do many of these types of things.
Okay.
Okay, so we basically took the 2014 comprehensive plan and overhauled it. We added a couple of sections in it, one being tourism, one being parks and rec. And we took community facilities and kind of separated it out into an infrastructure section and then community facilities in the sense of like actual physical locations, being like town hall, police department, fire department, and that sort of nature. As I said, we overhauled it pretty well. We focused a lot on adding significant goals for the next 10 years. We updated some demographics for you guys. Those are all based on the U.S. Census Bureau, and gave it a new facelift. So if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Josh, we're gonna have a public hearing at the council level before this is adopted, so there'll be a chance for public comment.
Yes. And we have had several meetings throughout the course of this over the last 6 months. We held them every 2 weeks, I believe is the right number. So there has been opportunity for the public to come and comment on the different sections, and we had surveys, and we did have some response, so there have been some public input up to this point.
Did y'all have time to review it in the time that I know that y'all read it cover to cover, so. I think tonight,
We're certainly not under the gun to do anything in particular tonight. If you want to wait till the next planning commission meeting, I don't have one scheduled. But if you are comfortable with it, it's pretty boilerplate. I mean, it's
Yeah.
the biggest, most important, for a comprehensive plan for something like Chesterfield may be more important. Where are we gonna put schools and where are we gonna have street improvements and that sort of thing for dynamic growth? Here, we're a little boxed in, so we don't have that kind of dynamic growth. It's more on a case-by-case basis. But it does help us when we make application for grant funding, which we do regularly. If I can say, housing goal number 7 is to proceed on with additional phases of the East End project. For our purposes, it's important to have this. But I'm not sure a comprehensive plan is gonna guide every decision in Blackstone the same way it would Powhatan or
And
Chesapeake.
this is the second time we've taken a look at it.
Right.
So, and you all are pleased with it, and,
Satisfied?
and it would be helpful to you in grant applications? So,
Let's approve it.
I think, there's what I was driving
Make
at.
a motion that you approve it.
Thank you.
Second?
Second,
All
sorry.
right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen,
All right.
ladies.
Did you have any questions?
The dog, the dog.
Okay, hold on. So, are we done?
We will
Are
adjourn.
you good with that?
Okay.
So let's cut this off and we can adjourn, and it is